Lauren sat before the large vanity in her room, her eyes fixed on her reflection. The white wedding dress, adorned with delicate lace details, seemed perfect, but in her gaze was a mix of fear and resignation. At 26, she felt her life was not her own. The ring she was about to place on her finger was part of an agreement made by her father, James, a powerful man who controlled every aspect of her existence. James had always been a demanding father. To him, Lauren was not just his daughter, but a key piece in his business expansion plans. When he proposed marriage to Ethan, Lauren knew her opinion didn't matter. Ethan was a charming and successful man on the surface, but the little time they spent together before the wedding revealed a cold, calculating, and extremely possessive man. "Lauren, are you ready?" James's firm voice echoed down the hallway, interrupting her thoughts. She sighed and adjusted her veil, trying to mask her inner turmoil. The mansion's hall was filled with guests, all awaiting the moment she would enter. The wedding was the event of the year, with camera flashes capturing every detail of the grandeur planned by James. Lauren descended the staircase slowly, feeling as if her steps were leading her away from her dreams. As she walked down the aisle, her eyes caught something: the window at the end. For a moment, she imagined running, leaving everything behind, and living her own story. But it was too late. With each step toward the altar, the weight of responsibility and fear kept her silent. Ethan awaited her at the altar, impeccable in his black suit. His green eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of having won, as if Lauren were just another trophy in his collection. He held her hand firmly, squeezing it with a force that seemed to say, "You are mine now." When the vows were exchanged and the ceremony ended, Lauren felt a deep emptiness. She knew that the decision to submit to the marriage was not out of love or desire, but to keep the peace within her family. At the reception, amid forced smiles and grand speeches, Ethan began to show his true colors. He spoke authoritatively about the future he planned for Lauren, without even consulting her. "Lauren won't need to work anymore. She'll be the perfect hostess for our events and commitments," he said, as if her life had been completely determined by him. James's gaze showed pride, but Lauren felt only frustration and sadness. With each passing minute, it became clearer that the control of her life had now passed from her father to Ethan. She tried to smile, but her mind was far away, wishing for a different future. That night, alone in her new room in Ethan's mansion, Lauren felt the weight of reality. She was trapped in a life she hadn't chosen, with a man who was already beginning to show his controlling nature. Lying in the enormous bed, her mind wandered to the past, to memories of freedom and a love that once made her dream. Her last thought before falling asleep was the desire to find an escape, a way to reclaim her life and perhaps her heart. The days following the wedding felt like a blur to Lauren. The lavish receptions, the endless flow of guests, and the constant presence of Ethan's domineering demeanor weighed heavily on her. Despite the beautiful mansion and the promises of a perfect life, Lauren couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Ethan's behavior, which had once seemed charming, now began to reveal itself as something darker. At first it was subtle. He controlled where she went, whom she spoke to, and even what she wore. Lauren's every movement was scrutinized, and any attempt at independence was quickly shut down. Ethan had made it clear that her role was to be the perfect wife, to stand by his side at all times, and to never question his authority. Lauren tried to ignore the growing tension, convincing herself that this was just the reality of marriage. But every time she looked at Ethan, her heart sank. The man she had once believed in now seemed like a stranger. His cold eyes and the tight grip he kept on her life left her feeling trapped, suffocated by expectations she never agreed to. One evening, as they sat together at a dinner party hosted by Ethan's family, Lauren tried to start a conversation with one of the guests, but before she could get a word out, Ethan's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with a force that made her flinch. "Lauren," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Don't embarrass me in front of our guests." Her heart raced, and she quickly withdrew her hand, the sting of his words lingering in the air. The rest of the evening was a blur, with Lauren feeling more like a prisoner than a wife. Ethan's possessiveness only seemed to grow with each passing day, and she began to realize just how deeply she had underestimated the hold he had on her. The next morning, After a sleepless night filled with restless thoughts, Lauren stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. She didn't recognize the woman she saw. The vibrant, free-spirited girl, who had once dreamed of living her own life, now seemed like a distant memory. Instead, she saw someone who had been swallowed whole by expectations. A woman who was no longer in control of her own destiny. She thought about the moments of freedom she had once experienced, the moments when she was truly herself, and then, in a flash, she remembered Liam, the one person who had ever truly made her feel alive, who had loved her for who she was, not for what she could offer. Her thoughts wandered back to the time they spent together before she had been forced into this marriage. Liam had always understood her dreams, her desires, and her need to be free. It was a love that had been full of passion and possibility, a love that she thought she had left behind. But now, in the silence of her marriage, that love felt like the only thing that could save her. Later that afternoon, as she sat in the garden, Lauren's phone buzzed. It was a message from her father, James. She hesitated before opening it, already knowing what it would say. More expectations, more demands. It was as if her every move was being dictated by forces beyond her control. Her eyes narrowed as she read the message, and for the first time, a thought crossed her mind. What if she didn't follow the rules anymore? What if she found a way to escape this life, to find the freedom she so desperately craved? But the thought was fleeting. The reality of her situation hit her hard. She was married, trapped in a gilded cage, with no way out. At that moment, a small flicker of hope sparked in her heart. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to escape. But that would mean confronting her past, facing the one person who could either give her the strength to break free or push her deeper into the life she had come to hate. Lauren's mind raced as she sat alone in the quiet garden, the soft rustling of the leaves the only sound breaking the silence. The weight of her thoughts threatened to overwhelm her. She had married Ethan, but with every passing day, her resentment grew. The love she once hoped to build had turned into a suffocating obligation. And the image of her old life, the life she could never quite leave behind, haunted her. The thought of escaping had lingered in her mind for days. What if she could break free from the golden cage she was locked in? What if she could run away, start over, and live her life the way she always dreamed? Her heart ached at the thought of the life she once had with Liam. The memory of him still felt fresh, his gentle smile, and the way he understood her in a way no one else had. When they were together, Lauren felt free, like she could conquer anything. But that life seemed like a distant dream now, a part of her past that was forever out of reach. Still, she couldn't deny the burning desire to see him again. Perhaps he was the only person who could help her find herself again. He had always been there for her, in a way that Ethan never had been. That evening, after dinner, Lauren found herself standing by the window of her bedroom, staring out into the distance. The house was quiet, but she could feel Ethan's presence looming over her like a storm waiting to strike. She hated the way he controlled her, the way his eyes followed her every move, as if she were nothing more than an object to be possessed. Lauren's phone buzzed, snapping her from her thoughts. It was a text message from an unknown number. "Lauren, it's Liam. I know things haven't been easy, but I want you to know that I'm here. If you ever need me, I'm just a call away." A wave of emotions washed over Lauren as she read the message. Her heart skipped a beat, and she felt a surge of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. Liam hadn't forgotten her. For a moment, Lauren was paralyzed by the idea of reaching out to him. She hadn't spoken to him in years, not since the day she left, the day she married Ethan. But here he was, offering her an escape, offering her a chance to reclaim her life. Her hands trembled as she typed a response. "Liam, I don't know if I can do this, but I can't keep living like this. I need your help." She hit send, her heart racing as she waited for his reply. The minutes felt like hours as she paced the room, trying to steady her breath. But when her phone buzzed again, she nearly jumped. "I'll be waiting for you, Lauren. Just tell me when." Tears welled in her eyes. The relief was overwhelming, but the fear of what she was about to do lingered in her chest. She knew that leaving Ethan would mean risking everything: her family, her reputation, and possibly even her safety. But for the first time in months, Lauren felt like she had a chance at freedom. She looked at her phone once more, the words from Liam still glowing on the screen. "Just tell me when." And in that moment, Lauren made a choice, the choice to reclaim her life. The following morning, Lauren woke up with a feeling of determination she hadn't had in years. The decision was made. She could no longer live in the suffocating cage she had built for herself. Ethan's constant demands, his possessiveness, and the pressure from her father, James, were too much. She needed to find a way out, and Liam was the only person who could help her. As she stood in front of the mirror, Lauren's heart raced. She had always been a woman of conviction, but now, the reality of what she was about to do seemed overwhelming. She was about to leave the man she had married, the life she had known, and risk everything for a chance at something better. A chance at freedom. The house was eerily quiet that morning, and Ethan was out for a meeting with business associates. Lauren knew that it was her chance to slip away unnoticed. Her mind flashed back to the last time she had seen Liam, years ago, before everything changed. The love they had shared still felt alive in her heart, and she knew that he was the only one who could offer her the escape she needed. Lauren packed a small bag with only the essentials. She left a note for Ethan, knowing it would be the last time she would ever see him, but she couldn't bear to face him again. She knew she had to leave quickly, before James or Ethan could find out. As she walked out of the house, the heavy door creaked closed behind her. The air outside was crisp and fresh, a sharp contrast to the oppressive atmosphere inside the mansion. Lauren's legs felt like lead as she made her way to the car parked at the edge of the driveway. She took one last look at the mansion, the life she had built. And for the first time, she didn't feel regret. She felt relief. The drive to the coast was long, but Lauren didn't care. She had a destination in mind: Liam's small inn by the ocean. It had been his dream to own the place, a quiet refuge from the chaos of the world. Lauren hadn't seen him in years, but she still remembered the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his plans. She knew that, no matter what, Liam would always be there for her. When she arrived at the inn, the sea breeze greeted her, cool and soothing. The small building sat on the edge of a cliff, overlooking the vast ocean. The sound of the waves crashing against the rocks below was both calming and exhilarating. Lauren stood in front of the inn, her heart pounding as she reached for the door. She hesitated for a moment, before knocking softly. The door creaked open, and there stood Liam, as if no time had passed at all. His dark brown hair was slightly tousled, and his piercing blue eyes softened when they met hers. "Lauren," he whispered. His voice filled with disbelief and something else: relief, hope, maybe even love. Tears filled Lauren's eyes as she stepped into his embrace. For the first time in so long, she felt safe. She felt like she was finally home. "I'm so sorry," Lauren said, her voice breaking. "I didn't know who else to turn to. I need your help, Liam. I can't do this on my own." Liam held her tightly, stroking her hair gently. "You don't have to do it alone. I'll help you, Lauren. We'll figure this out together." In that moment, Lauren knew that, no matter the obstacles ahead, she had made the right choice. She was free, for the first time in years. And with Liam by her side, she knew that anything was possible. But little did she know, Ethan and James would stop at nothing to bring her back. Lauren spent the next few weeks at Liam's inn, far from the life she had once known. The first few days were filled with relief as she adjusted to her new surroundings, the salty ocean air and the rhythmic crashing of the waves creating a peaceful atmosphere that she had longed for. Liam had been kind, patient, and understanding, offering her the space she needed while also making sure she felt safe. He introduced her to the local community, and little by little, Lauren began to rebuild the confidence she had lost over the years. She no longer felt like a prisoner in her own life, but deep down, Lauren knew it couldn't last forever. She was still married to Ethan, and her father, James, would never let her go without a fight. The threats had already begun. Late one night, as Lauren sat on the porch overlooking the ocean, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Come back now, or you'll regret it. Your father and I will do whatever it takes to make you obey." The message was simple but terrifying. It was from Ethan. Lauren's heart dropped as she read the words over and over again, the weight of the threat pressing heavily on her chest. She had left, but Ethan and James were relentless. They would stop at nothing to control her. Liam found her later that evening, sitting on the porch, staring out at the darkened horizon. Her phone lay beside her, the screen still glowing faintly. He sat beside her in silence, his presence a comforting reminder that she wasn't alone. "You heard from him, didn't you?" Liam asked, his voice soft but filled with concern. Lauren nodded, her hands trembling slightly. "He won't stop until I go back. He'll hurt you if I don't." Liam's jaw tightened, but he remained calm. "He can try, but I won't let him hurt you. We'll figure this out, Lauren. You don't have to go back." But Lauren knew the situation was more complicated than that. Ethan and James were powerful, and their reach extended far beyond what she had ever imagined. They had money, connections, and influence, things she didn't have. The feeling of helplessness crept back into her heart as she realized how small she felt compared to the world she had just escaped. But Liam wouldn't let her give in. Over the next few days, he took every precaution to protect Lauren, locking the doors at night and reinforcing the security around the inn. But Lauren knew they couldn't keep running forever. Sooner or later, Ethan and James would find a way to get to her. And when that happened, the consequences would be dire. One evening, Liam came to her with a serious look on his face. "I've been thinking," he began. "You can't stay here forever. We need a plan to get you out of this, and we need to do it quickly." Lauren's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? You think I should go back?" "No," Liam said firmly. "But we can't just wait for them to come for you. I'll help you find a way to break free for good. We can start a new life, somewhere where they can't touch us." Lauren felt a wave of hope rise in her chest. She didn't want to go back. She didn't want to be controlled by Ethan and James any longer. For the first time in weeks, she began to believe that there was a chance for her to truly be free. But even as she clung to that hope, a dark reality hung over her. Ethan and James weren't the only threats they faced. The world they were about to enter wasn't kind to those who tried to escape. The road ahead would be dangerous, and they would have to fight every step of the way. Lauren couldn't sleep that night. The weight of the message from Ethan, the threat that had loomed over her for days, pressed heavily on her chest. She had spent so many years feeling trapped, and now that she was finally free, it felt as though she was being pulled back into the darkness she had fought so hard to escape. The ocean, which had once seemed so calming, now felt distant. The gentle sound of the waves crashing against the rocks no longer brought her peace. It only reminded her of the life she had left behind. She glanced at Liam, who was sleeping on the couch in the next room, his presence comforting yet bittersweet. He had promised to protect her, to help her escape, but Lauren knew that keeping her safe would come at a high cost. The next morning, as the sunlight began to filter through the windows, Lauren and Liam sat together at the kitchen table. The silence between them was heavy, both of them lost in their thoughts. "I think it's time," Liam finally said, his voice low but determined. "We can't keep hiding forever. I know it's dangerous, but we have to take action. We need to get to the authorities, get help." Lauren shook her head. "We can't. My father has too many connections. If we go to the authorities, they'll just use their power to erase everything. I've been under his control for too long to trust anyone." Liam placed his hand on hers, his touch gentle but firm. "Then we'll do it ourselves. We'll start over, get away from all of this. But we need to make sure you're safe first. We can't run forever." Lauren felt a surge of gratitude. Liam was right. They couldn't keep hiding forever. But the reality of what they were about to face sank in. Her father would stop at nothing to bring her back. And Ethan, now more dangerous than ever, would make sure she was punished for her escape. The odds were stacked against them. Later that day, Lauren stood outside the inn, staring out at the horizon. The sun was setting, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple. But it was hard for her to feel anything but dread. She couldn't go back to the life she had before, but escaping completely seemed impossible. Even with Liam by her side, the threat of Ethan and James felt like an ever-present shadow. "I'm scared," she whispered, almost to herself. Liam stepped up behind her, his presence a steadying force. He didn't say anything at first, simply standing with her as the wind blew through her hair. Finally, he spoke. "You're stronger than you think, Lauren. We'll get through this. I won't let them take you from me." Lauren's heart fluttered at his words, but there was a sense of uncertainty in her chest that she couldn't shake. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that they could escape, that they could have a life together. But the fear of losing everything still held her back. That night, as they lay in bed, Lauren stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. She could feel Liam's presence beside her, warm and comforting. But it wasn't enough to calm the storm inside her. The walls were closing in, and she didn't know how much longer she could hold on. The next morning, everything changed. The door to the inn slammed open, and Lauren's heart stopped as she saw the men who had come for her. Ethan, her father. Their faces were filled with fury as they stormed into the room, their eyes locking onto her with a cold, calculating expression. "Lauren," James said, his voice dripping with anger, "you've made a huge mistake." Before Lauren could react, Ethan lunged forward, grabbing her by the arm with an iron grip. "You're coming back with us, whether you like it or not." Liam stepped in front of her, his body tense, ready to fight. "You'll have to get through me first." But Ethan just smirked, pulling out a gun and pointing it at Liam's chest. "You think you can stop me? You're nothing but a distraction. Get out of the way, Liam." The terror in Lauren's chest was overwhelming. She had hoped for a chance to escape, but now it seemed impossible. Ethan and James had found her, and they weren't going to let her go without a fight. The nightmare she thought she had left behind had returned, and this time, she didn't know if she would be able to escape. The drive back to Ethan's mansion felt like an eternity for Lauren. Her heart raced in her chest as she sat in the back of the car, her arm still firmly gripped by Ethan, who kept a watchful eye on her every move. Liam had tried to protect her, but the threat of violence had forced him to step aside. Ethan and James had won, at least for now. Lauren glanced out the window, trying to steady her breathing. The familiar sight of the mansion loomed in the distance, its towering gates opening as the car approached. Everything about the place felt suffocating. The sprawling estate, once a symbol of luxury and comfort, now felt like a prison. When they arrived, Ethan wasted no time in dragging her inside. Lauren barely had time to gather herself before she was led up the grand staircase to the large master suite that she had once shared with him. The room, with its opulent furniture and lavish decorations, felt like a mockery of the life she thought she was going to have. "I've been patient, Lauren," Ethan said, his voice low and cold as he shut the door behind them. "But you've crossed the line. You can't run away from me. Not now. Not ever." Lauren tried to pull away from him, but his grip on her arm tightened. "Please, Ethan, let me go. I don't want this life anymore." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You don't have a choice. You're mine, and no one, not even Liam, can take you away from me." Her father, James, stood in the corner of the room, watching them both with a look of disappointment. "You're making a mess of things, Lauren," he said, his voice cold. "You've always been so impulsive. But now, you'll learn that you can't escape what's been decided for you." Lauren's mind spun. Her father's words were like a slap to her face. She had always tried to make him proud, to live up to his expectations, but now she realized how little he cared for her happiness. She was nothing more than a pawn in his game. "I'm not going back to that life, Dad," Lauren said, her voice trembling but firm. "I won't marry Ethan. I won't live this way anymore." James's face hardened, and for a moment, Lauren thought he might strike her. But instead, he turned away, his jaw clenched in frustration. "You don't have a choice," he said, quietly. "You'll learn soon enough that you don't have the power to defy me." Lauren's heart sank. She had thought escaping was the hard part, But now she realized that getting out of Ethan and her father's control would be even more difficult than she had imagined. The days following Lauren's return to the mansion were nothing short of a nightmare. She was confined to her room, her movements restricted, and her every action monitored by Ethan. It wasn't just the physical walls of the mansion that kept her captive. It was the suffocating control that Ethan and her father, James, had over her life. Each time she tried to speak out, to protest, Ethan's cruel words silenced her. "You belong to me now," he'd say, his voice cold and final. He had made it clear that there was no way out. If she even considered defying him, there would be consequences. Not just for her, but for those she loved. The fear of what might happen to Liam if she continued to fight back haunted her every waking moment. Lauren spent her days in isolation, her thoughts a whirl of confusion and helplessness. She wanted to scream, to run, but she couldn't. Every time she tried to reach out to Liam, to find a way out, her father would shut her down with his cold words and threats. But even in the midst of her captivity, Lauren couldn't forget the promise Liam had made her. "I'll come for you, Lauren, no matter what it takes." It was that thought that kept her from completely breaking. She knew that, deep down, Liam wouldn't abandon her. He had always been there for her, even when the world seemed to be falling apart. But would he be able to find her? Would he risk his life to rescue her? Every time she thought about him, a mix of fear and longing swept through her. She missed him more than she ever thought possible. She had loved him once, and even now, trapped in this gilded cage, she could still feel the pull of that love. One afternoon, as Lauren sat by the window, staring out at the sprawling gardens below, a knock at her door startled her. She quickly wiped away the tear that had slipped down her cheek, trying to regain her composure. "Come in," she said softly, her voice betraying her vulnerability. The door opened, and to her surprise, it wasn't Ethan who walked in, but her father. James stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Lauren," he said with a sigh, "you've disappointed me." Lauren's heart sank. She had always tried so hard to meet his expectations, but now she realized she was just another pawn in his game. "I didn't ask for this," she said quietly, her voice filled with hurt. "You and Ethan, you've ruined my life." Her father's face darkened, and he stepped closer, his eyes cold. "I did what was necessary to secure the future of this family," he said sharply. "And now, you'll do what's necessary to secure your own future. You'll learn to love Ethan, and you'll accept the life that's been chosen for you." Lauren's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "I can't love him," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't live this way. I need to be free." James's eyes narrowed. "Freedom? You think you're free, Lauren? You're lucky to have the life I've given you. Don't make the mistake of thinking you have any choice in the matter." Lauren stood up from the window, her eyes filled with defiance. "I don't care about your business or the life you've planned for me. I care about living. I care about my happiness, and I will find a way to make that happen." Her father's face twisted into a sneer. "You're a fool if you think you can escape from this, Lauren. You'll never get away from us." Lauren's breath caught in her throat. She knew he was right in a way. He had too much power, and escaping seemed impossible. But deep down, she knew she couldn't give up. She had to keep fighting, even if it meant risking everything. "Maybe," she said quietly, "but I'm not going to stop trying." Days blurred together as Lauren remained trapped in the mansion. Each morning, she awoke to the same oppressive atmosphere, the same routine of silence and fear. Ethan's presence was constant, and James's disapproving gaze followed her wherever she went. She could feel their control tightening around her, suffocating her every movement. But despite the darkness, there was one thought that refused to leave her mind, the thought of Liam, the memory of their love, of the moments they shared before everything fell apart, lingered in her heart like a flickering flame, refusing to be extinguished. Lauren had tried to reach out to him in secret, sending a few desperate messages when no one was looking. But every time, they were intercepted, and Ethan would punish her, reminding her that she had no escape. Still, she held on to the hope that somehow Liam would find a way to rescue her. One afternoon, as she walked through the mansion's garden, trying to find some peace in the sprawling grounds, Lauren noticed a figure standing by the gate. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light, but then she saw it. A familiar face, a face she had not seen in months. It was Liam. Her heart skipped a beat as she rushed towards the gate, her pulse racing. She had to be sure. It couldn't be real, could it? Was he really here? Liam was standing just beyond the fence, his eyes locked onto hers. His face was weathered, but there was a determination in his gaze that made her believe this was no dream. "Liam," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a mix of shock and disbelief. His lips curled into a small, reassuring smile as he moved closer, his voice low but urgent. "I couldn't stay away, Lauren. I've been looking for you." Tears welled up in Lauren's eyes as she reached out to him, her hands trembling. "How did you find me?" she asked, her voice cracking. Liam took her hand gently, his grip firm. "I knew you'd be here, in this place. I've been asking around, trying to figure out where they'd keep you hidden. I couldn't let you go back to that life, Lauren. Not without a fight." Her breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she thought she might collapse in his arms. The sense of relief was overwhelming, but she knew they couldn't stay there for long. "What are we going to do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Ethan and my father, they'll come for me." Liam's expression hardened, and he pulled her close, his arms wrapping protectively around her. "I won't let them take you. Again," he said with absolute certainty. "We're getting out of here. Together." Lauren closed her eyes, allowing herself to believe him for the first time in a long while. She had been so consumed by fear and uncertainty, but now, with Liam by her side, she felt a glimmer of hope. But even as they stood together in that moment of peace, Lauren knew that their battle was far from over. Ethan and James wouldn't stop until they had her under their control again. They had already proven how far they were willing to go to keep her in their grasp. Liam squeezed her hand, pulling her from her thoughts. "We'll figure it out, Lauren. We'll get you away from all of this. But we have to act fast." Lauren nodded, determination rising within her. She couldn't go back to that life. She wouldn't. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was finally in control of her own fate. And with Liam by her side, she knew they could face whatever came next. Lauren's heart raced as she stood next to Liam, her mind reeling from the unexpected reunion. She had spent months feeling trapped, and now, with Liam standing beside her, a glimmer of hope flickered in her chest. But she knew the danger wasn't over. Ethan and James would stop at nothing to bring her back, and their threats weighed heavily on her. That night, as the moonlight poured in through the windows of the small room Liam had prepared for her, Lauren couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. She and Liam had discussed their options all afternoon, but the choices seemed limited. The moment they left the safety of the inn, they would be exposed, and James and Ethan had the power and resources to find them. The thought of running away again made her stomach twist in fear, but she knew she had no other choice. "We can't keep running forever," Liam said, his voice calm but filled with the weight of the situation. "We need to make a move soon, before they come for you." Lauren nodded, her gaze fixed on the ground as she thought about her options. For the first time in her life, she was facing the truth of her situation. There was no way out without risk. Either she would continue to live under Ethan's control, suffocating in a marriage that was never hers to begin with, or she would have to fight back, risking everything for a chance at freedom. "I'm so scared," Lauren whispered, her voice barely audible. "What if we fail? What if they find us?" Liam took a step closer, his presence a steadying force in the midst of her panic. He cupped her face gently, lifting her chin so their eyes met. "You're not alone, Lauren. Whatever happens, we face it together. I won't let them hurt you." Lauren's heart swelled at his words, but doubt still lingered in the corners of her mind. Ethan and James were powerful, and she was just one woman who had already been forced into a life she didn't want. Could she really escape it? Could Liam truly protect her from the wrath of her father and husband? "I don't know how to trust anymore," she admitted softly. For so long, I've been living in fear, believing that there was no way out. But now with you, Liam's finger gently pressed against her lips, silencing her fears. I know you've been through hell, Lauren, but I'll help you find your way back to yourself. We'll fight for your freedom, no matter what it takes. Her breath caught as she looked into his eyes. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, in his gaze. He was willing to risk everything for her, and in that moment, Lauren realized that she was willing to do the same. We need to leave tonight, she said, her voice filled with a new sense of resolve. I can't go back. I won't go back. Liam nodded, a small, determined smile tugging at his lips. We won't let them win. Let's pack our things, and we'll leave as quietly as we can. We'll head to the coast, where they won't be able to find us. As they moved quickly to gather their things, Lauren's mind raced with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. But for the first time in months, she felt alive. She felt like she was finally making a choice that was her own, free from the expectations of her father and the control of her husband. Just as they were about to leave, Lauren paused, looking out the window toward the dark horizon. The road ahead was filled with uncertainty, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't stay in the life that had been chosen for her. The love she once shared with Liam had been the only thing that had ever made her feel truly free, and she would fight for that love with everything she had. Let's go, she said, determination settling in her chest. Let's make our escape. We deserve a chance at happiness. Liam nodded, taking her hand firmly in his, and together they walked out the door into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. The night was quiet, save for the distant sound of crashing waves against the shore. Lauren and Liam moved quickly through the small village, keeping to the shadows, their footsteps barely audible on the cobblestone streets. The air was cool, and the darkness seemed to offer them a temporary shield from the world they were running from. Their plan was simple: get to the bus station and leave the coast as fast as possible. But every step they took felt like a countdown. Ethan and James would have already realized that Lauren was gone, and the clock was ticking. They knew the consequences of being caught, the danger it posed to both of them, and it made Lauren's heart race with fear. Liam led her through the narrow streets, his eyes scanning their surroundings, every sense alert. We need to move. Faster, he whispered, his voice low but urgent. Once they realize you're missing, they'll be after us. Lauren nodded, her throat tight with anxiety. She hadn't dared look back at the mansion, but the thought of it still haunted her. Ethan's cold face, the grip of his hand on her wrist, the fear that had consumed her in those final moments. It all felt like a nightmare she couldn't escape. But now, in the silence of the night, she had a chance to rewrite her story. As they approached the bus station, Liam slowed his pace, his eyes narrowing. Stay close to me, he said, his hand tightening around hers. There might be people watching. Lauren nodded again, her grip on his hand firm as they walked into the small, dimly lit station. The old ticket booth sat at the far side of the room, the attendant barely paying attention as they approached. But before Lauren could speak, a voice called out from behind them. Lauren. Her heart dropped. She froze, the sound of her name slicing through the silence like a dagger. Slowly, she turned around, and her breath caught in her throat. Standing in the doorway was Ethan, his cold eyes fixed on her. His suit was rumpled, his face hard, but the rage in his expression was unmistakable. Behind him stood two of his men, tall and imposing, their faces unreadable. You thought you could escape, didn't you? Ethan's voice was filled with venom as he stepped closer. I told you, Lauren, you don't get to run away from me. Liam stepped in front of her, his body tense, his jaw clenched. Leave her alone, Ethan, he said, his voice cold but unwavering. She's not going back with you. Ethan sneered, taking another step forward. You really think you can protect her, Liam? You're nothing but a distraction. She's mine, and I'm not letting her go. Lauren's heart raced as she looked between Ethan and Liam, the realization that the battle was far from over sinking in. Ethan and his men weren't going to let her go without a fight, and she wasn't sure how much longer they could hold out. but Liam's gaze never wavered. "You'll have to go through me first," he said, his tone resolute. He stepped closer. To Ethan, his body still blocking Lauren from view. For a moment, the air was thick with tension. The seconds dragged on, every heartbeat a reminder of the danger they were in. But then, just as it seemed the situation would escalate, the sound of sirens echoed in the distance. A police car pulled into the station parking lot, its lights flashing. Ethan hesitated, his eyes flicking to his men. The sirens grew louder, and for a brief moment, there was uncertainty in his expression. "This isn't over," he spat, his eyes filled with fury. "You can run, but I'll find you." He turned and walked out, his men following closely behind. Lauren stood frozen, her mind still processing the shock of the encounter. The police car stopped near the entrance, the officers stepping out and looking confused as they saw the tension in the air. Liam didn't hesitate. He grabbed Lauren's hand and pulled her toward the bus booth. "We don't have much time," he said, his voice low but urgent. As they bought their tickets, Lauren glanced back over her shoulder. Ethan and his men were gone, but the danger still hung over them. She knew they couldn't stay in the same place for long. Liam ushered her toward the bus, his face set in determination. "We'll get away from here," he said, his voice steady. "We'll find a place where they can't touch us." Lauren nodded, her heart still racing. She was scared, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of hope. They were still running, but with Liam by her side, it felt like there was a chance, one they would fight for, no matter the cost. The bus ride was long, and the rhythmic sound of the wheels on the road became almost hypnotic. Lauren sat beside Liam, her hand tightly clutching his. Despite the comfort of his presence, anxiety gnawed at her. They had managed to escape for now, but she knew that Ethan and her father wouldn't stop until they had her back. Her mind wandered to the conversation they'd had earlier in the day, after they'd escaped the train station. Liam had promised her that they would find a place where she could be safe, where they could live without fear. But she knew that promise came with its own dangers. Liam didn't know the lengths her father and Ethan were willing to go to. They had resources, connections, everything to track her down. "We need to keep moving," Liam said, his voice low and filled with determination. "We can't stay in one place for too long. I've been thinking about where we can go." Lauren turned to him, her heart heavy. "Where will we go, Liam? How can we be sure we're safe?" Liam's blue eyes met hers, his expression unwavering. "I know a place. It's far enough that no one will find us easily. But we have to be quick. We can't afford to be followed." Lauren nodded, her mind racing. The hope that had ignited in her heart was slowly being overshadowed by fear. What if Liam's plan didn't work? What if they couldn't outrun Ethan and her father? The thought of them finding her, bringing her back, made her stomach turn. As the bus neared the next stop, Liam leaned in close to her. "Stay close," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. "We're almost there." Lauren nodded, the weight of the moment settling over her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had a chance, like she wasn't completely powerless. But she knew they couldn't let their guard down, not for a second. The bus pulled into the station, and Liam stood, helping Lauren to her feet. They moved quickly, blending into the crowd of passengers, their faces hidden in the sea of people. Lauren's heart raced as they walked through the station, her eyes darting around, scanning every face for signs of danger. When they finally reached the exit, Liam stopped and turned to her. "We're almost there. Just stay close to me, and we'll be fine." But as they stepped outside into the cool evening air, Lauren's heart dropped into her stomach. Standing near the exit, blocking their way, were two of Ethan's men. They hadn't made it far, and now their escape was in jeopardy. Liam's hand tightened around hers and he pulled her closer, his body tense. "Stay calm," he whispered. "We'll find a way out." Lauren's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it, the moment they'd been dreading. She didn't know how they would escape, but she knew that running wasn't an option anymore. The men had spotted them, and it was only a matter of time before Ethan and James would be on their heels. Liam's eyes flicked around the station, assessing their surroundings. In a flash, he made his decision. "This way," he muttered, pulling Lauren toward an alleyway that ran parallel to the station. They moved quickly, trying to avoid being seen. As they sprinted through the alley, Lauren's breath hitched in her chest. The sound of footsteps behind them grew louder. The men were getting closer. "Liam!" Lauren gasped. "They're gaining on us." "I know," Liam said, his voice grim. "But we have to keep moving." They turned a corner and found themselves on a quiet street. Liam grabbed Lauren's arm and pulled her into a small, dimly lit cafe. The door swung shut behind them, and they were greeted by the confused gaze of the barista. Liam immediately walked up to the counter. "I need a place to hide," he said quickly, his voice steady but urgent. "Do you have any rooms available?" The barista hesitated but nodded. "We have one in the back. It's not much, but it's private." Liam nodded, pulling Lauren with him as they headed toward the back of the cafe. Lauren's heart was still pounding, but the adrenaline coursing through her kept her focused. They couldn't stop. Not yet. Once they were safely inside the small room, Liam locked the door and looked at Lauren. "We need to figure out our next move. I can't let them take you back, Lauren. You're too important to me." Lauren's heart swelled at his words, but the fear still gripped her. They couldn't stay here for long. Ethan and James wouldn't stop until they had her. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We keep moving," Liam said, his expression hard. "We don't stop until we're far enough away. I'll keep you safe. I promise." Lauren nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. She didn't know what the future held, but with Liam by her side, she finally felt like she had a fighting chance. The following days passed in a haze of constant movement. Liam and Lauren never stayed in one place for too long, always on the run, always looking over their shoulders. Each time they stopped, they moved with purpose, their eyes scanning the surroundings, alert for any sign of Ethan or James's men. The thrill of their escape, the relief of being together, was constantly overshadowed by the looming danger. Liam had taken Lauren to several small towns, staying in quiet inns, moving as quietly and unnoticed as possible. But Lauren couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. They couldn't outrun Ethan's wealth and connections forever. Every day she spent in hiding brought her closer to the edge, to a breaking point she wasn't sure she could handle. "Liam, we need to stop," Lauren said one evening, her voice filled with exhaustion. "We can't keep running like this." Liam turned to her, his brow furrowed with concern. He had been trying to protect her, trying to give her a sense of normalcy in the midst of all the chaos, but he knew it wasn't enough. They had to confront the truth. The threat from Ethan and James wasn't going to go away, no matter how far they ran. "I know," he replied softly, his voice filled with weariness. "But we can't stop now, not when we're this close." Lauren's eyes narrowed. "Close to what? What are we really doing, Liam? Running away forever? Hiding forever? This isn't the life I want. And it's not the life you deserve either." Liam looked down, taking a deep breath. He knew Lauren was right. But what else could they do? How else could they escape the grasp of Ethan and her father? "We can't just walk away from them, Lauren," he said quietly. "They'll never stop hunting us." Lauren shook her head, her voice shaking. "And I can't live like this anymore, hiding in fear every single day, never knowing what will happen next. I want my life back. I want to be free." Liam moved closer to her, his expression softening. "I'll fight for you, Lauren. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure you're free." But even as he spoke, a part of him knew the truth. This wasn't something they could escape, not without a price. And if they wanted a future together, they would have to face the consequences, head on. Later that night, as they sat in their small room at another inn, Lauren couldn't sleep. Her thoughts were racing. She couldn't keep running. She had to find a way to put an end to this, once and for all. She had to stop Ethan and James from controlling her life. She got up from the bed, her heart pounding with determination. It was time for a plan. No more running, no more hiding. Liam, sensing her unease, stood up as well, What is it, Lauren? We're going back, she said, her voice steady, though her heart was heavy. We're going to face them. We can't keep running. I won't let them control me anymore. Liam looked at her, a mixture of admiration and fear in his eyes. You're sure about this? I am, Lauren said, her eyes meeting his. We have to end this now, Liam, for both of us. The decision was made. They would go back, face Ethan and James, and take back what was rightfully hers. They had no idea what the future held, but they couldn't keep living in fear. It was time to take control of their destiny, no matter the cost. Lauren and Liam stood outside the gates of Ethan's mansion, the towering structure looming ahead like a fortress. The night was dark, the air thick with tension as they made their way toward the front door. Every step felt heavier than the last, but Lauren's resolve never wavered. She had made a promise to herself that she wouldn't let fear control her any longer. Liam walked beside her, his hand firmly holding hers. Despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, his presence was a comfort. He was with her, and that made all the difference. But even as they approached the door, Lauren couldn't ignore the knot in her stomach. Ethan would be expecting them. Her father would be expecting them. The last time she had been inside this mansion, she had been forced to marry Ethan, shackled by the chains of duty and control. Now, she was here to take back her life, to confront her past and fight for her future. You sure about this? Liam asked, his voice low but filled with concern. Lauren nodded, her eyes never leaving the door. I have to be. It's the only way we can put an end to this. The door swung open, revealing Ethan standing in the doorway. His eyes narrowed when he saw Lauren, but there was no sign of surprise on his face. It was as if he had been waiting for this moment. Lauren, he said coolly, his voice laced with disdain. I should have known you'd come back eventually. You can't escape what's meant to be. Lauren's heart clenched at the sound of his voice. The same voice that had once promised her a future she never wanted. But now, there was no fear in her, only determination. I'm not here to go back, Ethan, she said, her voice steady. I'm here to take control of my life. You can't keep me locked away any longer. Ethan stepped forward, blocking the door. His expression was one of annoyance. You don't understand, do you? You're mine. You'll always be mine. Liam moved in front of Lauren, his body tense as he faced Ethan. She's not yours, Ethan. You can't control her anymore. You never could. A flicker of anger flashed in Ethan's eyes as he took a step forward, but Liam stood his ground. The tension between them was palpable, and for a moment, it felt as if time itself had frozen. Enough of this, Ethan spat, his hand moving to his side. You're making a mistake, Lauren. You'll regret this. But Lauren wasn't afraid anymore. She had lived in fear for far too long. She wasn't going to let Ethan or anyone else dictate her future. I regret nothing, she said firmly, her voice filled with resolve. You don't control me, Ethan. I'm free, and I'm not going back. The door behind them opened, and James entered the room, his presence commanding as always. Lauren, he said, his voice dripping with disapproval. You're making a fool of yourself. You can't escape us. This is your life now. Lauren's stomach twisted as she looked at her father, the man who had always told her what to do, who had manipulated her for years. She had once hoped to gain his approval, but now she realized that it wasn't worth the cost. No, Dad, Lauren said, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and sadness. This is not my life. Not anymore. Her father's face darkened, and he stepped closer. You'll regret this, Lauren. We will make you regret this. I won't regret it, Lauren said quietly. Not when I'm finally free. Liam turned to Lauren, his expression filled with understanding. We're done here, he said, his voice calm but firm. We're leaving. But just as they turned to leave, a sharp voice cut through the air. You're not going anywhere. Lauren spun around to see Ethan standing in the doorway, a cold smirk on his face. In his hand, he held a gun, pointing it directly at Liam. Don't you dare move, Ethan said, his voice low and menacing. For a moment, Lauren's heart stopped. Her fear, the fear she had been running from all along, surged inside her. But she refused to back down. She couldn't. "Put the gun down, Ethan," Liam said, his voice steady despite the danger. Lauren stepped forward, her gaze locked on Ethan. "If you hurt him, I swear I will never forgive you." Ethan's smile widened, but there was something in his eyes that suggested uncertainty. He had always thought he could control everything, but now, in this moment, it was clear he was losing his grip. The silence between them was deafening, and, for the first time, Lauren realized that Ethan's power was nothing compared to the strength she had found within herself. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into this mansion months ago. She was stronger, braver, and ready to fight for her freedom. With a swift motion, Liam lunged forward, knocking the gun from Ethan's hand. The tension broke, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Lauren allowed herself to breathe. They had won this round, but the battle was far from over. Lauren stood in the middle of the mansion's grand foyer, her heart pounding in her chest as she looked at the two men who had controlled her life for so long. Ethan and James, now defeated in their own way, stood before her, their faces filled with rage. The confrontation had come to a head, and for the first time, Lauren felt a strange sense of power. She wasn't the woman who had cowered under their control anymore. Liam stood beside her, his presence a constant source of strength. The gun had been taken from Ethan's hand, but the tension between them all remained palpable. Lauren knew this wasn't over. The escape she had hoped for, the dream of a life free from her father's manipulation and Ethan's cruelty, was now within reach, but the cost was still high. "You think this is over?" Ethan growled, his eyes blazing with anger. "You can't just walk away, Lauren. You're mine, and I'll make you pay for this." Lauren felt a chill run through her, but she refused to let fear take over. Ethan's words, though harsh, no longer had the power to break her. She looked at him, her gaze unwavering, and took a step forward. "No, Ethan," she said, her voice firm. "I am not yours. I never was. And I am done living for you, or anyone else but myself." Her words seemed to hit him like a slap, and for a moment, a flicker of doubt appeared in his eyes. He was used to having control over everything, to forcing others into submission. But he was losing her, and that loss was something he couldn't tolerate. James, standing silently behind Ethan, finally spoke, his voice cold and calculating. "You don't understand, Lauren. We have everything. Power, influence. You're throwing it all away for what? A fantasy? A love you don't even know?" Lauren's heart twisted at the words, but she stood tall. She had once believed in her father's vision for her life. She had once thought that love and approval could be earned, but she had learned differently. The love she needed was not something her father could give. It was the love she had for herself, and the love Liam had shown her when she felt most lost. "I'm not throwing anything away, Dad," she said softly, her voice steady with conviction. "I'm taking back what's always been mine. My freedom, my choice, my life. And if that's a fantasy, then I'm done living in your reality." Ethan lunged toward her, but Liam was quicker. He stepped between them, his posture protective. "Stay back, Ethan," he warned, his voice calm but filled with authority. "If you lay another hand on her, I'll make sure you regret it." For a moment, the room was filled with nothing but the heavy silence of their standoff. Ethan's eyes flicked to his father, James, as if seeking permission. But James just stood there, watching. He had always been the mastermind, the puppet master, pulling the strings, but now he seemed uncertain. The hold he had on Lauren, the control he once had over her, was slipping through his fingers. "You won't get away with this, Lauren," James said, his voice barely a whisper of the power it once had. "I will make you regret defying me." But Lauren didn't flinch. "You've already lost, Dad," she said quietly, her heart steady in the face of his threats. "You've been losing me for a long time." The weight of those words hung in the air, and for the first time, Lauren saw her father's facade crack. He wasn't just angry, he was afraid. He was afraid of losing control, afraid of losing her. But there was no turning back now. The chains that had held her were broken, and she was free. Liam turned to her, his eyes softening. We need to leave. Now." Lauren nodded, her eyes still locked on her father and Ethan. As they walked toward the door, she could hear Ethan's voice trailing behind them, laced with venom. "You'll regret this, Lauren. You'll come back to me. You always do." But Lauren didn't look back. She didn't need to. She had made her choice, and there was no turning back. Once they stepped outside, the cold night air hit Lauren like a wave, and for the first time in months, she felt truly alive. She was free. With Liam by her side, she knew she had made the right decision. Liam took her hand, and together, they walked away from the mansion, away from the life that had tried to break her. As they stepped into the unknown, Lauren knew that the road ahead would be hard, but for the first time in her life, she was ready to face it. Lauren and Liam walked into the night, leaving the mansion, and the life she had once known, far behind. The city lights flickered in the distance, a symbol of the future that awaited them, a future filled with uncertainty, but also with possibility. For the first time in years, Lauren felt a sense of freedom she hadn't known existed. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. She knew that. Ethan and James were powerful, and their reach stretched far. But as Liam squeezed her hand, she realized that she wasn't alone anymore. For the first time, she wasn't running from something. She was running toward something. Toward a life she had chosen for herself. Toward a future filled with love and hope. They found a small cabin in the woods, far from the prying eyes of Ethan and her father. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, and that was all that mattered. For the first time in years, Lauren woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside the window, to the smell of fresh coffee brewing in the kitchen. The cabin was simple, but it was peaceful. It was the life she had always wanted but had never thought possible. Liam had become her anchor, the one person who believed in her when no one else did. He had given her the courage to leave, to break free from the chains that had bound her for so long. But more than that, he had given her the chance to live, to truly live. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, Lauren began to heal. She worked with Liam on his small business, helping him run the inn. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. It was honest work, and it was theirs. For the first time in a long time, Lauren felt like she had a purpose. She was doing something she loved, with someone she loved, and that was enough. But as the days passed, Lauren couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she needed to tell Liam. She had kept it hidden for so long, the secret she had carried with her since the night she left Ethan. The night they had shared, the night they had both found solace in each other's arms. It had been more than just a moment of passion. It had been the beginning of something new, and it had left her with a gift, a child. She had known for weeks, but the fear of what Ethan and her father would do had kept her silent. But now, in the quiet comfort of their new life, the time had come to tell Liam the truth. One evening, as they sat together by the fire, the warmth of the flames casting a soft glow on their faces, Lauren took a deep breath and turned to him. "Liam," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "there's something I need to tell you." He turned to her, his expression filled with concern. "What is it, Lauren? You can tell me anything." She looked into his eyes, the love and trust between them so strong that it gave her the courage she needed. "I'm pregnant, Liam," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm having your child." For a moment there was silence. But then, Liam's face broke into a wide, disbelieving smile, and he reached for her hand, holding it gently in his. "Lauren," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what to say. This is the best news I could ever hear. We're going to be a family." Tears welled in Lauren's eyes as she leaned into him, her heart swelling with happiness. For the first time, she felt like everything was falling into place. The pain, the heartache, the years of fear and doubt. They were all behind her. And ahead of her was a future filled with love. With Liam, and with their child. They held each other tightly, knowing that the road ahead would not be easy, but they also knew that together, they could face anything. They had already fought for their freedom, for their future, and they would continue to fight for each other. no matter what. And so, as the fire crackled in the hearth and the night stretched on, Lauren knew that this was just the beginning. The beginning of a new chapter in her life, one that would be filled with love, strength, and the promise of a future they would build together.
Do you love heartwarming love stories that touch your soul? Then subscribe now to our channel, Timeless Love Stories. We post new videos every week, filled with romance, twists, and happy endings that will leave you inspired. Don't miss a single chapter of this magical journey. Click the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to be alerted whenever a new video is released. Come experience these unforgettable stories with us.